Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another segment of Asaph Cafe. I am your host, Asaph Adonai, and this time on our third episode for 2016, we have one of our regulars on my immediate left, Linda Brooks Curtis, and we're going to have a one-on-one this time in this segment of Asaph Cafe. I've been wanting to do that anyway, just talk one-on-one, and so let's do a song different here. For starting off this program, and I think you'll recognize it.
My Old Kentucky Home.
Yeah.
Good old Stephen Foster.
Such a cool song. My Old Kentucky Home.
And something I realized, having my whole life been steeped in music of various types, much of it folk music and old tunes, that when I started listening to Scottish favorite music, a lot of the melodies that were used in early America had actually come from Scotland.
Okay, I guess I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. And of course, Bonnie Blue Flag, which was the anthem of the Confederacy, was actually from a Scottish march.
Okay, that's something I've learned.
So it's kind of interesting because it used to be that when people saw me, they'd say, "You have the map of Ireland on your face." And I'd go, well, none of my ancestors were Irish. They were English and Scottish, and then way before that, Swiss. And Welsh, of course. But it's kind of interesting because I can hear those melodies. Just like my girlfriend and I were singing, she was directing an anthem, and we were listening to it, and she said, "This sounds familiar." And I said, "Yeah, the Aladdin theme pirated from it." Mm-hmm. The theme for the animated film Aladdin actually drew melodies, whether the person knew it or not, from All Things Bright and Beautiful. The Old English song, All Things Bright and Beautiful. So it's kind of interesting that, and of course a lot of our music echoes other national music that people aren't aware that they're taking those melodies from something else.
You know, that's funny you mention that. They do that with classical music too. Like they'll take certain passages from classical music and put them into cartoons and movies like that. Especially the old Bugs Bunny cartoons.
Well, the Disney things, openly used classical music.
Yeah,
and it was
Fantasia, I believe.
It was told what it was. You knew it was cited, but these others incorporated into their music, and they don't realize that it actually is pirating. Well, maybe not pirating. It's not intentionally stolen, but that it actually comes from something else.
I see. Okay.
Anyway, since we're impromptu and we just go off the top of our head, that occurred to me. And I will explain why I have these brownish, purplish, yellowish teeth right now. And it's because I had oral surgery and I had to use a special antibiotic rinse. It was absolutely necessary to keep from getting infection. And finally my doctor let me stop using it once any threat of infection was gone. But it says right on the instructions that it will probably cause discoloration that can't be gotten off until you have it officially cleaned, dentally cleaned. So I have these funny yellowish, purplish teeth.
Well, I don't think it'll show up on camera, but I don't think you have to worry about it.
Well, anyway, I'm going to smile, regardless.
I'm just playing the theme to the movie The Titanic.
Ooh, yeah, I remember
Leonardo
that.
DiCaprio. Didn't he just get an Academy Award the other day?
And what's her name? Winslet. Yeah, he
Kate
got
Winslet?
one.
Yeah.
He got
For his latest film?
Kate Winslet. He got one for a new film.
Yeah, I don't know the name
I
of it.
don't know the theme of it, but there are pictures of him in a rugged Arctic outfit, so it looks interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it was nominated in 4 categories.
Yeah,
So,
I didn't see the
12
awards.
categories.
I didn't see it this time around, but I was familiar with it.
Anyway, I would like to thank Missoula Manor Homes, where I reside.
Well, you can just acknowledge him. I was looking at camera and do that right there.
Well, that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
For providing a sack lunch for me so that I can come here and be on the show and talk with Asaph, our friend.
Yeah, I wanted to acknowledge them too. Thank you for letting Linda appear on this 3rd episode for 2016, Asaph Cafe.
So anyway, instead of my having to stay there and eat, they provided me with a sack lunch to my specification. Not just seniors, but a lot of other people have a number of food intolerances, and I'm finding, I read an article on the internet today that foods that cause problems for seniors are largely the same food allergies that I have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been lactose intolerant all my life and had problems with red meat. But then I became hypoglycemic, which means I don't deal well with sugar, which is a problem for seniors, many of whom become diabetic when they are seniors.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And-
I've had some lactose issues too as I've gotten older, so I drink a lot of that silk milk these days
And-
instead of
And yeah, as long
regular
as it's
2%.
almond milk instead of soy,
Yeah,
because
I like the almond. Yeah.
I don't tolerate soy substitute now, and I don't tolerate sugar substitutes. I'm allergic to eggs. They told me that when I got a flu shot and was sicker from the shot than I would have been from the flu. And of course, gluten-free, which means no wheat. Fast foods are a problem, and I noticed that I dropped a lot of weight when I stopped eating fast foods. And I just thought I would throw that out there, that
Okay.
we all potentially have food intolerances, and we should pay attention to them because they can have far-reaching results.
Okay, yeah.
And that's just a little commercial for that, and to watch out for your diet and not think that people are fanatics just because they say, well, I can't eat wheat, and it's not a fad. It's not a fad.
Yeah.
So here I am with my fruit and my gluten-free sandwich with pure vegetables, no mayonnaise.
Well, it looks good, this sandwich you left. I'll eat it in a bit.
So anyway, they're very nice to me there, as they are to all seniors, and we have people there who are independent living, well into their 90s, whereas if they had a separate home somewhere, they'd be having trouble with finances and getting around, and having to shovel walks in the winter and all that stuff. So it's nice to have a place like that. It's not a full care facility, and it's for people, you have to have witnesses say that you are capable of independent living to get in there.
I see. Well, I'll keep that in mind when that time comes for me.
When that time comes, which is a ways off.
Well, perhaps for now, but, it's good to prepare and plan those things if you get a chance. Don't you think?
I think so.
Yeah. Well, did you know that last song that I just played while you were talking?
Yeah, it was Hill Street Blues.
Oh, okay, good. I'm glad you caught that. I used to watch that show years ago. I didn't think anybody would remember it.
I used to watch it
Well, that
when I
show's
got
tame.
home from a hard day of work.
It's tame compared to some of the cop shows now, like this one here.
I know that. That's not CSI. What is that?
Close.
Okay, I give up.
Law and Order.
Oh, yeah. Mango.
That's the theme to Law and Order.
Well, anyway, last night I finally watched the entire movie, A Night at the Museum, which
Cool.
I had attempted to watch before, but I didn't like it because there were too many historical inaccuracies in it, and it was kind of scary. But I watched the whole thing last night, and I really realized what it was about, and there were tremendous performances in it.
Well, they do take artistic licenses in a lot of these films because
But
it's a Hollywood movie.
Well, yeah, and you should realize that it's just a movie. But anyway, it was so funny that the theme quote in it is a line that is actually written by this hilarious, ridiculous character in Twelfth Night by Shakespeare. And Viola, the heroine, reads this letter from a would-be lover to her, and it's about greatness. And the quote reads, "Some people are born great, others achieve greatness, and others have greatness thrust upon them." And you think, ew, this is just something this ridiculous guy said. But there's a lot of truth in that. Some people are forced to become great by rising to the circumstances and overcoming them.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the whole theme of the movie.
Cool.
So did you have any comments on that?
I hadn't really. I've only saw the movie once, so I can't really comment too much.
Oh well, but so many times in history.
Oh yeah.
I mean, in real life, people are forced to become great by not chickening out and running, but facing up to a situation and doing the right thing, having the correct values. And then this week, I was surprised to get a thank you card from my granddaughter, who's 6.5. She's the one who played the piano on the show.
I remember her.
She thanked me for her Christmas gifts, even though she'd already sent me a thank you video. And she drew her special sketchings on it of a piano and
I saw
a
that.
harp
That's what you showed me.
and a guitar and some musical notes. And they were very recognizable and very good. So I'll treasure that note forever, and I posted it on my door. People come by and look at it, and it reminds them of their grandchildren or even their children when they were young. So it's kind of neat, and that was kind of a treasure. And I remember that last summer when she was here, she not only notably enjoyed the free carousel, or the carousel at Caras Park, but she, in the little shop adjoining the carousel, I bought her a tooth fairy box.
A tooth fairy box, huh?
Because she had just lost her first tooth. And she'll treasure that forever. And again, there are dreams associated with that.
Oh yeah. When I was a little boy, I was told about the tooth fairy too. You know,
and wasn't there a film with Julie
I was just getting ready
Andrews?
to talk about that. I saw that film just last night for the first time. It's a film called Tooth Fairy with the athlete Dwayne Johnson, and it was just really amusing, that film.
Well, what kind of character was he?
Dwayne Johnson's character, he's like this professional hockey player, and he has a relationship with his girlfriend and her 2 children. And so the little girl, she's like 5 years old, she loses a tooth, and so, Dwayne Johnson's character doesn't believe in telling kids about these little stories like Santa Claus and Tooth Fairy and that sort of thing. So he kind of shatters her dream a little bit and tells her about the Tooth Fairy, that there's no Tooth Fairy. And so that didn't sit well with the Tooth Fairy world. They were watching that, and of course Julie Andrews is the lead Tooth Fairy, the Tooth Fairy queen. And so they serve him a summons that he's to appear before Julie Andrews at the Tooth Fairy land. And so, and so, as his punishment for dashing this little girl's dream, he has to serve for 1 week as a tooth fairy. And if he doesn't follow the rules or do his job, then he has to serve another week. And so it was kind of an interesting film because he was like resisting, believing in the tooth fairy thing. So he kept getting in trouble with Julie Andrews all the time until he started straightening up. And throughout the film, which I can relate to, he not only dashes the little girl's dream, but the older brother of the little girl, he was like a guitarist, a really good guitarist, and he wanted to enter the talent show and be like another Eric Clapton. And Dwayne Johnson smashes his dream too, tells him he'll never play and he needs to like just grow up and stop dreaming. So that didn't sit well with the Tooth Fairies either, so that got him in more trouble. Yeah. But what I liked about the film was at the end, after he loses his girlfriend, loses the 2 children, and loses his job as a hockey player and has to sit on the bench, the Tooth Fairy, his mentor Tooth Fairy, comes to the rescue, helps him straighten up, and starts believing and restores the relationship between the girlfriend and the 2 children. And then he gets in good standing with Julie Andrews, the lead Tooth Fairy, and so they finally release him and let him go back home at the end of the film. It was just such a cute film to me, but it had some...
Well, did he ever get married?
Yeah, at the end he proposes to her at the very end of the film, and then she says yeah, so it had a really happy ending. But when I saw that, I could relate to that film in a lot of ways because there are people who are so into life, I guess is the way to describe it, that they have no dream, no vision. And so if somebody else has a dream or a vision, then this person will try to smash it. And I wrote about that in my autobiography too, how there are people who will try to smash whatever dreams or hopes you have for whatever reason. Whether it's because they don't think you should pursue it.
Or maybe they lost their dreams.
Yeah, it could be a number of any of those reasons that people smash others' dreams. But the Tooth Fairy, in the Tooth Fairyland, they saw that and they said, we're going to fix that problem. We're not going to let this man smash this little girl's dream of the Tooth Fairy, or let him smash the dream of this little boy.
Guitarist.
The guitarist, yeah. So I just thought that was so cute watching that film. And as you know, I lived that too. I was able to overcome people attempting to smash my own dreams in the past. And for whatever reason, that seems to happen to people. I don't know if it's human nature or
Sure did to me.
No, I know, and I'm not trying to make you feel sad. I'm just saying from my own experiences. Like when I got my first job in music when I was 21, and everybody tried to squash that, saying I shouldn't go to Los Angeles, I'll never make it, and all this, just spewing out venom. And I go there anyway, and end up meeting Deke Cannon, who was friends with Bumps Blackwell, who was Little Richard's manager, who went on to become my teacher, and the rest is history. I wound up studying with Bumps for 3 years, and I told this story a few times in my book, and the documentaries that the university had done on me and my career.
But you had some chances before that.
A few chances, but I mean nothing of that caliber prior to that, except for the conservatory.
That's right. If you hadn't been able to go to the conservatory, which was basically gifted.
Yeah.
It was gifted to you.
Yeah, I had to audition for that, but I passed the audition, so... And they had some requirements of what they wanted me to do as an audition piece, and I had time to prepare for it at that time, which I did, and I passed, and they accepted me. But even
well, things were set in motion early so that you would have the character and the ability to rise above circumstances.
But as sad or as wonderful as that was, getting to go to the conservatory, I still had no support, which I wrote about in my book. And so when I share these stories, I'm not sharing these stories like I have a chip on my shoulder. No. I wrote my autobiography and told my experiences to try to encourage other people and help them. But before I went for that conservatory, boy, the attacks were coming everywhere. It was coming from my birth mom, my father, brother, sister, people I grew up with, and so on. And I'm not trying to pick on them when I say that. It's just a reality.
Well, I think anybody who tries to achieve something out of the ordinary faces
that's my
that.
point, yeah. And I had that. I had that coming at me from everywhere.
But, I didn't have support. I had to take out a loan to go to college. I had to teach, and pay off college loans as well as make a living.
Yeah.
And when I went out to Los Angeles, the biggest reason I didn't break into show business is because I couldn't just do that. I had to work a 9-to-5 job and never was able to get enough work to quit it. Constantly, a 9-to-5 job. So I didn't have support either. And I kept having people say, go home and teach school. Go home and teach school, where there's nothing wrong with teaching school, because one of the greatest joys in the world is helping other people achieve. But, I would have been able to if I'd been one of those people who had their rent paid for and all of that stuff. And I don't want to segue too much to something that is unsavory, but when you see Bill Cosby on trial right now for supposedly raping these women, luring them with hope of career advantages, and then drugging them and raping them.
Mm-hmm.
I met Bill Cosby, and granted, I might not have been as cosmetically appealing as some of these other people, but he didn't come on like that to me.
Well, I normally don't like
So
to talk about
they
people's personal
were
lives, but
looking to use him.
well, you know what I think?
So it was mutual. It wasn't just him victimizing them.
Yeah, and I'm probably the only one who thinks that, but Amanda's innocent until proven guilty, and I never believed any of that stuff that came out about him, but they'll figure it out.
Well, the point
So-
is, in all honesty, he probably did something.
Well, he may have,
And
but,
certainly there was sexuality involved, but the expression is putting out for your career. And that's what I was going to say. I wouldn't put out, and people could tell that, I wouldn't put out sexually to try to get career advantages,
Well, that
which
happened
is
to me,
why
too.
some people succeed.
Yeah, but that
Men
I had
and
that-
women.
I had that come at me too since I was 22 years old. People were coming at me. They call it the casting couch, and I always said
Yeah.
no because. I
And
wanted
so
to
you
keep-
miss out if
Well,
you don't
might
get
miss out, but,
involved.
I think the good Lord blesses faithfulness, and in my case, whenever the casting couch came my way, I always walked away and said no because my integrity was more important to me. And I wound up getting opportunities anyway over the years. But it's like you said, it depends on the support you get. And it's very clear I didn't get it from family or people I knew growing up. And that was painful when I was going through that because I was so young. And I had to make up my mind I was going to do it anyway. And you know what I've learned in life? When you follow your dream and people don't believe in you, don't follow your dream to show them and have that attitude, I'll show them. Just do it because you love it. Because, I'm going to tell you, like Oprah Winfrey said, when you make it, the people who are attacking you, they're not going to come up to you and say, oh, we're sorry, we were wrong. If a person thinks you're a certain way before you make it, they're going to still think that way after you make it and probably think worse things. And I'm talking from experience. That's why my book is so truthful.
Revealing.
Revealing, that's the word. So again, I don't have a chip on my shoulder when I tell truth. I'm just telling truth and just sharing experiences. But yeah, that casting couch has been going on in Hollywood for years. I don't think it's ever going to change.
And elsewhere.
Well, yeah, I'm sure. But I'm not an actor or anything, so I'll never have to worry about it. But as far as music.
Back
You
in
know.
medieval times and Renaissance times, and even after that, a person, in order to achieve success as an artist, had to have a patron. That's why. Who was the artist who painted the Sistine Chapel? Michelangelo. That's why he had to have the Medici family support him, and that's why Mozart was so rebellious because he couldn't stand the patron system. And a lot of women, opera singers, would never have had a chance anywhere without having a wealthy man support them and further their career. That's just the only way there was to achieve anything in those days. It didn't matter how good you were. So at least today we have the advantage of, once you do get some sort of foothold, you can pursue it on the merits of what you do and also on how well you are admired. Of course, there is the commercial aspect of it, but something else that a lot of people don't recognize today is that there would be no tax base, no government, no high salaries for inept officials without private enterprise. Nothing would exist without private enterprise. So commercialism isn't the monster some people think it is. You know, there may be monopolies, there may be groups that achieve eliteness, but if you look at the communist countries and socialist countries of Europe, they managed to form their little oligarchy of powerful people who don't have anything to recommend them, no special ability, no special logic, simply that they were born into a separate wealthy class that is the dictator class. So, you know, we have to watch out when we don't respect private enterprise. And commercialism in the arts happens. You're not going to always have free money donated by somebody.
Well, you know, I have to admit, like I told you once before, I was lucky enough to have the right support, not with family and stuff. I had to get away from that aspect for it to happen. And for me, it happened. And I wish it could happen for other people. And the reason I'm saying that is because this Asaph Cafe, it might be a small plane in comparison to the shows that are out there, but it gives me joy to share it with you because in a small way, it's like giving to you when maybe your past necessarily didn't give it or the support. So that's.
And the other thing is,
that's why
you have not been paid for by the government.
Well,
people have donated money to help you.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to get that in my lifetime, and I've spent my entire life in music. I'm 57 now. I've been doing it since I was 21 years old, and of course I live in Montana, so I don't do the performances to the degree I did when I was in Los Angeles and Vegas and Hollywood, obviously, but when I was a lot younger, I did a lot of performances, and I got paid for almost every single one of those at that time. And, you know, like when I played with Pat Guidry and High Rollers, I took a job at the Tropicana Hotel in the daytime where they had those, you know, giving out the change for a quarter at that time.
Change belts.
Change for $1. Well, I don't think they do that anymore. This was, 30 years ago? And then at night, I went to the Marina Hotel, which was across from the Tropicana, and I played till about 1 or 2 in the morning. And I did that 5 days a week. So I was very lucky to have those opportunities and do that. I got to do some small travel with Pat Guidry and the High Rollers, like when we went to Monterey, California, and did the suicide prevention with Dinah Shore and Doris Day and the Beach Boys. That was so fun. And of course, prior to that, I also worked with a group called the Dred Scott Review, and they were just like the Temptations. I mean, they had dance moves, like I mentioned in my book, that could rival any group out there, and I was their musical director because I knew how to chart out the music and plan everything, which they didn't. And I have to go back even further with my opportunity studying with Bumps, because I studied with him for 3 years and he was training me too. And Bumps was going to be my agent after all the years of working and training, preparing, but he passed away before I got that opportunity, which I wrote in the book. And but I knew what to do at that time. And so when I landed all that work in Vegas, it was a lot of fun. And then, of course, by the time I was 31 years old, I started playing for the Salvation Army, and I played for them for 12 years. I got paid for that. And
so why did you switch from trumpet to piano?
Well, I knew how to play the piano all along, even though I was focusing on the trumpet in my early 20s and 30s. And like Noelle McAvoy, the young lady that did the latest story on me, the one that does the Wake Up Missoula program, when that question came up, as I got physically older and as time started changing, the opportunities for solo trumpeters were getting very scarce. Even now, you don't hear a lot of trumpeters like Herb Alpert and Doc Severinsen and that sort of thing anymore like you once did. There was a time where there were a slew of trumpeters out there on television and concert and stuff. And so I just decided...
It pays to be versatile.
Yeah, well, I
Pays to
just
be
knew
versatile.
that it got to the point that the trumpet jobs were thinning out by the time I got into my, say, late 30s or early 40s. I knew that it was thinning out, and I was able to play the piano. And the climax for me, I took a job as a nanny, which I wrote about in my book, and I was distancing myself from the trumpet when I was like maybe in my mid-40s, something like that. And it got to the point where I didn't see any reason to practice the trumpet anymore because there were no jobs. And I was lucky if I did 2 events publicly for a whole year. That's how much it thinned out after I left Hollywood and Vegas with the horn. And eventually, I just decided to start playing the piano full time. And as I took that job as a nanny, that was a whole year went by from the time I stopped playing the trumpet to the time I decided I was going to start playing the piano full time. And then I recently did a tribute on Facebook to one of my last piano teachers, which was the late Marshall Coswell. And for a whole year, he trained me on the piano. It was switching everything I learned from the trumpet to the piano. It's like, kid, you're good. You're a good trumpet player, and I know you can play the piano, and I'm going to help you. And I'm going to take all the knowledge you have from the trumpet, and I'm going to teach you on the piano, really teach you. So switching everything. And I trained for him for a whole year, and then he finally retired at the Northern Hotel. They hired me on the spot, and the rest was history as far as playing the piano all the time. And I was like 40, I was something like, let's see, when did that happen? Somewhere in my 40s when that happened.
Have you found that there are a lot of things in Montana that are better than other locations you've been?
That's a yes or no question. Obviously, you can't compare Montana to Las Vegas.
I can.
Or Hollywood as far as work, as far as musician work necessarily. Because a lot of people, like let's say in Montana, they do their music like on the side and they have full-time jobs somewhere. And see, when I was in the big city, I never had to worry about those sort of things. I didn't have to work 8 hours a day except for the one job with the Tropicana, and that wasn't really work. That was just walking around, getting extra change, giving that change back. But as a whole, I was able to sustain myself when I was in Vegas, all those years I worked there, through my music. But I had the right people in my life, too, who were playing on the main strip, and those were factors.
Well, there is entertainment because
Yeah,
once
those
again,
were
as I
factors.
keep hammering, Las Vegas has the title Sin City.
Yeah.
But the thing is that those venues of sin and gambling are the source of the income, the living income of numbers of people.
Well,
And it's all from private enterprise with people who voluntarily pay to gamble. You know, it might be slot machines, it might be poker, it
Well, I'm
might
going to tell
be...
you why, I'm going to give you my opinion why it worked for Liberace when he was a young man in Vegas. Because, like you were saying, you know, Vegas once had that, I call it that Frank Sinatra gangster image, when the Aladdin and all those other Sands was there at the time. And so the guys who want to, like, play poker and stuff, and the wives would just go in there and watch this young piano player playing the piano, and it worked. And, of course, I'm no Liberace by the stretch, but I didn't have to do all the so-called sin things that they call it, you know, Sin City, because I would do things like go to Circus when I had off time and watch the circus show while I'm eating, or I'd go to the Liberace Museum when it was open at that time and explore that and look around at the
There are
museum.
strip joints, there are bars, there are all kinds of things like that that really are on the fringes of entertainment, and they're always on the fringes of entertainment, but very few people get into that lifestyle or even indulge in it more than once, you know.
Yeah.
So
Well, I'm not going to tell someone not to go to one of those
strip joints.
entertainment strip joints or whatever. That's their own thing. I'm just saying when I was there, for me, I found things to do outside of that.
Well, when I
And
was,
it was
there,
a lot of fun. But I'm not a good-looking lady like you either, so I mean, they usually
Well,
single
you
out
know,
ladies in places like that.
I worked as a photographer in the major hotels, and I had all kinds of come-ons and sleazy opportunities and weird things like men walking up to me with hotel room keys and things. and,
Oh, well.
And but like you said, you just turn it down and walk on with your life and what you're doing. And of course, I taught at the middle school, high school, and college level, and I lived in an area totally beyond the Strip, which is a completely respectable community, and participated in church choirs and things like that. So, it's Las Vegas has opportunities of all kinds.
Of course it does.
There are people who work in casinos all night at some sort of function in an honest,
and I
legal capacity, go home and live totally normal lives that they wouldn't have, that wouldn't even betray that they were from Las Vegas. So,
well, if I were to go back to Las Vegas now at this point in my life, the only thing I'd be interested in is playing at the mall, because they hired piano players at the mall. The mall in Vegas is so big on the main strip that you can have several piano players throughout the mall and it won't clash.
Mm-hmm.
That would be about the only thing I'd be interested in. And what they do is they just want the piano players to go in there.
Yeah, but there is a fashion show mall.
Yeah, that's
but
one of the
there
malls
are
I'm
other.
talking about. They do that now.
There are other full-size malls. There's the Boulevard Mall over on Maryland Parkway, and the Meadows Mall over off of Decatur and the freeway. So the Fashion Show Mall is quite impressive, and there are lots of venues in it. I worked at the Fashion Show Mall for Macy's. I worked in fine women's business attire, and that was fun. I really coveted all the clothes, though. But people would come in from abroad to Vegas, and they just wanted to come in and spend money at Macy's.
Yeah.
And they'd come in and they'd take a whole pile of things and just shower those purchases, and I'd get all these commissions off it.
Yeah.
And it was just like they were giving me, they were handing me something by giving business to the store.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting.
Well, I haven't played in Vegas in years now, but I didn't necessarily like the lifestyle, but I did like the work and I did like the pay in Vegas. It pays well when you're...
And it's a
when you're
24-hour town, which
Yeah.
is something, we have some 24-hour type things here, but
Yeah.
not stores like,
But see, to answer your question about comparing Montana to Vegas, what I like about Montana, obviously the scenery and so on is much more beautiful. But as far as the musician work here, there's a lot more in Vegas than, say, Missoula, Montana, for example, or any other city in Montana. But there are musicians here in this state, I think, that hold their own.
in California, besides the climate and the water shortage and all of that, was a little bit of hassle because it seems like everything is so far away. You have to drive such long distances, and they're really... no matter how much they brag about it, there really isn't an efficient bus system.
Well, when I moved to Montana,
You gotta
one
take
of
the
the reasons
taxi
I moved here, as
or
I
drive.
wrote about, I just got big city burnout. I was tired of the big city. I was tired of going 5 miles an hour on a 5-lane highway every day and stuff like that. I was tired of the smog. I was tired of the crime. I was tired of what they call the street way of life, where you have to be street smart every time you walk out your front door, from hustlers and all the other. I just got tired of that.
And that
And
reminds
that's
me.
why I moved to Montana, to just slow down. But I knew when I came out here, my music work would diminish much more than when I was in the big city, obviously. So
But
that's the price you pay.
You probably weren't prepared to see the involvement of a full-fledged artistic community in Missoula.
Well, yeah, and there
when
was
you
no
got
way for me
to
to know that when
Missoula,
I first moved here. Because I didn't move to Missoula when I first came to Montana.
Montana Children's Theater,
Yeah.
MCAT, and all of the civic groups and the barbershop music.
Mm-hmm.
It would blow somebody's mind who didn't know in advance it was like that here. But anyway, I wanted to point to a more innocent time. I may have mentioned this before, but when we're talking about movie experience, I remember clearly, yes, I do have a clear memory of that time and before. I was 4 years old, and it was a treat for us in 1953 to be able to go watch a revival of Pinocchio, the cartoon movie, the animated film. But I became terrified in the first part of the film when the coach driver decides, essentially kidnaps Pinocchio and pays the honest John for him. I got up. I couldn't get anybody to leave the film and take me home. So I walked all the way home in tiny little Stanford, Montana. In 1953, things were so safe then that a 4-year-old child could walk home, let herself into the house because you didn't have to lock your doors. There wasn't any crime element. There was no danger. My parents were gone on a social evening, and so essentially we were being babysat while we were at the movie. Well, nobody was there. So I walked back to the theater, rejoined my friends, and sat and watched the rest of the film. And for the rest of my life, I thought I was someday going to be able to breathe underwater.
Well,
but I
Walt
remember
Disney
the music.
He had such a fun imagination.
And there was such
obviously.
a dream of there's a spiritual quality that will bring us out, that will sustain us, that will forgive us and save us and cause us to have a full life. So there was such virtue in that. And then the fact that it was such an innocent time then. You wouldn't dare do that now. I couldn't even go into a supermarket when I lived in Las Vegas and my son was just a few months old without being afraid that if I didn't have him with me every second, somebody was going to try to kidnap him. And it was partly because he had this iridescent white skin and red hair, but it was also because those are the things that happen. And
now you see, that's what you're talking about is why I left a big city.
And
It
it just blows my mind that anybody could ever leave a baby or a child in a car and run into a store for a few minutes and then be gone hours.
Where I come from.
Oh my gosh,
that's
I
not a good
can't even think of that. In Las Vegas, the temperatures are over 100 degrees.
I know.
And literally just cook a child, even if the child isn't kidnapped. It just doesn't. I could never leave my child for any length of time.
So now, you see, everything you're talking about is why I left a big city. All that stuff you just mentioned.
Yeah, but it's not just the big city. People
I know,
do
but it's
that
more frequent
in smaller
in the big
towns
I know,
too.
but it's more frequent in big cities, especially where I come from. I mean, I told you that story about when I saw a literal. I've seen chain snatchings. I've seen cars just being taken from people where I come from. And I told you that story about these two Hispanic fellas that were watching the guy that was driving his car, and he got out of his car for a second, was taking coins out of the payphones that they used to have at that time. And they were scoping this guy, and I had noticed it, and I didn't put two and two together. And so when the guy that was collecting change, he had his car running, and he just went to a second payphone, which was not too far from the first one. And while he was taking change out of there, these two Hispanic fellas just leaped in that car like Superman and went, and drove off and left that guy there. And I saw that with my own eyes.
Well,
and I was like, oh man, I got to get out of here. This is crazy living here.
Well, my husband had a buyer. He was an artist, and he had a buyer for his artwork. In Studio City, one of the major thoroughfares. And there was a bar nearby that was often frequented by Mexicans. So after he had made his transactions and was going to turn in for the night, he dropped by the bar for a drink before he went home to sleep. There, his home away from home. And he got into his vehicle, which was a pickup, and found himself with a knife in his back. And it was the Mexicans who shoved him out of his pickup and took off with it.
And
he
what I don't like
reported
about
it
those
stolen, and must have been 3 or 4 months later, that the authorities found it next to the border, the Mexican border. And it was found, but by then, of course, he had acquired another vehicle and settled everything with insurance, and with the police. But it shouldn't have been that dangerous there. But there are people like that, and I am not saying it is just Mexicans, because it could be criminals of any type. There are criminal minds out there of any description.
Yeah, but see, what I was going to say, what I don't like is, see, when you hear stories about Hispanic people doing activity like that, everybody just assumes that all Hispanic people are like that, which is not true. And so that's why I left the big city, because I just got so tired of experiencing and seeing.
Well, the problem is,
things like that.
with that stereotype, is that years ago, when people came from Mexico, it was immigration, and whether they had immigrated legally or not, they became naturalized citizens and were proud to be citizens and pay taxes and contribute to the economy and lead honorable, decent lives. But since then, because of that birthright citizenship, which social workers pushed on to Mexicans, they feel that if they manage to have a child at somebody else's expense in the United States of America, they were entitled to all social benefits and welfare and handouts that an honest citizen would. And they never bothered to even try to become citizens. So the American taxpayers had to pay billions of dollars printing everything in Spanish as well as English because they refused to learn English.
Well, I guess
I have encountered that most of my life.
I guess that just doesn't sit well with you when people do those things, but I understand that, though.
Well, why? Our forefathers who were German and Russian and Polish and Italian did what they could to assimilate and learn English and try to become good, upstanding citizens. They were able to keep their heritage. They were able to preserve their national identity within the melting pot of the United States. They wanted to become legal citizens, and they did. And so why should there be this difference just because these people refuse to learn English? I just never understood it. And it's not just because I'm an English teacher.
Okay, I understand how you feel that way.
Well, that's taking away billions of taxpayer dollars that could have been used for something deserved.
Here's a familiar song.
Star Trek. Those who go beyond.
That's my version of Star Trek anyway. I have all 10 movies, all 10 Star Trek films, plus a TV series in my collection. So, I guess you might say, they call it a Trekkie, right?
Yeah, am I in your will?
I don't know, I hadn't thought about that. Why, you want my Star Trek collection when I croak? Is that it? Alright, I'll have to fix that. Yeah, what an imagination Gene Roddenberry had, just like when we were talking about Walt Disney. What an imagination Disney had. And look at the legacy he left. Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and, what is it, Disneyland, Disney World, and all
They
the
were
rest
all
of the
clean
stuff.
cut and family friendly.
That is correct. And the same with Gene Roddenberry. He was like, I think he had a statement. I think he was like giving a message at that time when he created the Star Trek series. Like that one example. Did you see that episode of Star Trek with the creatures that were half black and half white? Did you ever see that episode? There were two creatures from this planet called Charon. One was black on the right side and white on the left side, and the other was white on the right side and black on the left side. So the ones that were black on the right side didn't like the ones who were white on the right side. And he wiped out their whole planet because of their prejudice and their hatred. And I think Gene Roddenberry was
A
trying
lot
to
of
make
symbolism
a statement.
in that, yep.
Yeah, I think he was trying to make a statement at the time. And that was such a...
And it worked.
Yeah, and not only did it work, it also got a special science fiction award, talking about racism and prejudice at that time in the 60s.
Well,
It got a special award. That particular episode, and when I saw that, I really liked it, because the message is, look, if you're from a different culture, a different race, big deal. Put that prejudice and all that indifference aside before you wipe yourselves out like these two beings did on there. I mean, they destroyed their whole planet, and there were only 2 of them left on that big old planet.
Maybe some Islamic people should have to watch that.
Well, I don't know, but you got to remember that was in the 60s, and there were a lot of racial tensions in the United States at that time. And then, of course, there was another episode, the first interracial kiss that was introduced on Star Trek. Captain Kirk's crew went to a planet where these guys had extraordinary powers. They can force people to do things. And so their leader was so sick, and Dr. McCoy cures him, and then instead of them saying thank you, they hijack and kidnap Dr. McCoy to make him stay, which forces the crew of the Enterprise and Captain Kirk to have to go save their doctor. And so in this episode, they had the first interracial kiss because, see, it wasn't a kiss of love. They were forced. So they had the actress that played Uhura, Nichelle Nichols, and William Shatner. They had the first interracial kiss. And the thing was, I have this documentary on Gene Roddenberry, the ideas and the concepts that he was introducing. And everybody thought that Star Trek was going to lose their sponsors and what have you. All that did was make the show more popular, make people wake up. Both of those episodes. So the point that I think Gene Roddenberry is making is culture, race, religion, it don't matter. It should not matter. I think that was Dr. King's message too. Not this outer skin, but the
To
character
judge
of the person.
not by the color of my skin,
Yeah,
but
but
the content of
the
my character.
That is
Which
the
is the
point
way it
that I
always
think,
should be done.
Yeah, and I think that Gene Roddenberry used science fiction to make that point.
Mm-hmm.
And on that note, it's almost time to sign off.
Oh.
Well, we can do a second taping, which I normally do. We just pick up where we left off.
Yeah, well, I want to be a restaurant hostess at the Big Hilton in Las Vegas like I was when they have the Trekkie convention.
All right, well, we could...
And we have the ladies in purple dresses and red hats.
So on that note, before we sign off to do show number 2, are there any people you want to say hello to on camera that you can think of?
No, just my darling son, Rusty, and his wife, Megan.
Well, you heard it
and
here,
my granddaughter,
Rusty and Megan.
JD, and my grandson, Brogan, and all my dear friends at Missoula Manor Homes.
And I'll acknowledge the Missoula
And Sweet
Senior
Adelines.
Center, too. Oh, and the Sweet Adelines. There you go. So you heard it here, all the acknowledgments. So before we sign off, I'll just call this part 1, and we can just pick up where we left off with Gene Roddenberry.
Happy trails to you.
Yeah, let's do that real quick.
Happy trails to you before we meet again. Happy trails to you. Here's hoping until then. Da 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 da. Happy trails. God be with you.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to this segment of Asaph Cafe. On my immediate left is my guest, and I wanted to do a one-on-one, Linda Brooks Curtis. I am your host, Asaph Adonai, and so until our next show, Maranatha.
Maranatha. I don't think I have another show in me, Asaph.
It's all right.
Is it? I think it was okay.